I should have made it a little larger to be able to see, but I'll be giving you the references, and we'll be starting in chapter 1. I want to start off by saying there's been a tension in the Church of the Nazarene over legalism and a theology of relationship for a long time. Most of it, in my opinion, has to do with the semantics of the word perfect, and we talked last week about Wesley's doctrine of Christian perfection, and the fact that we get stuck on that word perfect, and we have a definition in our head of what it means, and what its actual biblical applications are something different. And so because of our preconceived ideas about that word, we tend to go about our theology in the wrong manner. In striving to be perfect, just as many of the Jews strive to obey the 10 Commands, we have made rules, lifestyle guidelines, special Nazarene commitments. I want to read to you a few that are now defunct that at one point in time you would have heard preached even from this pulpit. You used to not be able to chew gum in church. I have some books that are probably as old as this building in a special part of my library, and some of the sermon illustrations are about those pagan Methodists chewing gum in worship services. You used to not be able to watch a television. In fact, it was preached against even owning or having a television within your home. I hate to tell you, your pagan pastor has 3 currently in his house, 2 of which are used for watching movies, and the other one has the actual cable hooked up to it. I didn't have this one in there, but I should add it. We used to preach against having cable. We used to not be able to attend the circus. It seems that finally, after 146 years, the Church of the Nazarene has managed to put Barnum and Bailey Circus out of business. Women used to not be able to wear makeup, jewelry, or slacks. When my parents first started out in the ministry in 1977, my mother, on one of the first Sundays, she was a pastor's wife, wore slacks to church, and a group of women pulled her aside and told her that that is not how a woman who was a pastor's wife was supposed to dress. Years later, my mom and dad pastoring a different church, those same group of ladies saw them in a district assembly, and they all had a good laugh over the silliness of telling her that she had to wear slacks, as they were all wearing slacks at that moment. A more serious one. If you were divorced, and this comes from the 1960 manual right here in my hands, and your spouse had not had an affair, you were not allowed to remarry. I don't care if you were being beaten to a pulp. If you did, you could not be a member of the Church of the Nazarene. And the church used to consider such behavior, if you remarried after such a divorce, adultery. Which leads me to my public confession. I want you to know that I went out on a date with a woman other than my wife last night, and we went dancing. I know what you're thinking. A Nazarene pastor went dancing. My parents are still in shock. To quote my mom, that's not how I raised you. Growing up as Nazarene PKs, or Nazarene pastors' kids, we used to say, you don't want to drink or smoke because it could lead you to the evils of dancing. Until my college years, those rules were unchanged. I think the current language in the rules of Christian conduct says something along the lines now that you're allowed to dance, but to not dance in a way that would provide a spiritual hindrance. I may be a little bit off on my exact language. I even have proof and evidence of my action. You can go ahead and put it on there. I want everyone to see this. Last night, I attended my very first dance at 39 years of age with another woman, the father and daughter dance at the middle school. Growing up, I never went to a dance or to a movie theater. The first time I saw a movie in the theater, I was in high school. I spent the night at a friend's house whose mother was a board member. She was the NYI president, Lisa. And I knew it wasn't just simply a sleepover. I knew my friend David and I were going out on a double date. His girlfriend had a cousin. Now, I want to say I got the better pick, but that's not saying much. I couldn't even talk to her because her breath smelled so bad of cigarette smoke. I thought that I would rather lick the toilet than kiss her. The whole time I'm in the movie theater, I thought the walls were going to cave in on me. Here I was, in a movie theater, a Nazarene pastor's kid with a girl that smoked. I didn't go to dances either. At first, it started out as a parent's rule. My parents didn't want me going to dances. But later, they kind of relented, and I just adopted it as a regulation, what it was required for me to be a good Nazarene Christian. Last night, I looked into my little girl's eyes, and I started thinking of that song, Butterfly Kisses. Now, I'm going to read a portion of those lyrics so you can know where my mind was at, but I probably won't make it through them, and I'm going to have to quit. There's two things I know for sure. She was sent here from heaven, and she's Daddy's little girl. As I drop to my knees by her bed at night, she talks to Jesus, and I close my eyes, and I thank God for all the joy in my life. Oh, but most of all, for butterfly kisses after bedtime prayer, sticking little white flowers all up in her hair, walk beside the pony, Daddy. It's my first ride. I know the cake looks funny, Daddy, but I sure tried. Oh, with all that I've done wrong, I must have done something right to deserve a hug every morning and butterfly kisses at night. And I'm not going any further. First, when I started thinking of those lyrics at that dance, I wanted to cry. Then common sense overcame me, and I realized I was surrounded in a gym full of dads, and there was no way I was shedding a tear. Then I got angry, and then I thought about some young boy breaking her heart for the first time. But then I looked back at her, and I thought, man, am I lucky or what? What rule, what regulation would want me not to have this moment with my daughter and teach her how a man should treat her? Do we achieve this perfection by keeping a Christian diary or a log of our sin? Stargate 2017, I lied to my wife when she asked me if she looked fat in that outfit, and I want to drug my children so they can go to sleep. Living a holy life, striving for Christian perfection is not about rules. It's twofold. It's about living above sin. It's about God living in us and giving us victory. To quote the famous theologian Nacho from Nacho Libre movie, don't you want a little taste of the glory? Don't you want to see what the glory tastes like? If you haven't seen that movie, I'm sorry. You've missed out. Second, it's also about having a proper relationship with God. We Nazarenes define sinning as breaking a known law of God. In other words, we know it's wrong before we do it. There are those things that aren't gray. There are those things that are obvious sins. If you steal, you know it's wrong. But what if you've been taking the company's toilet paper? You might not have thought it was wrong because everybody else was doing it. You know having an affair on your husband is wrong, but maybe flirting over Facebook with an ex, you saw as just harmless fun. They live in another state. They have their own family. You didn't mean anything by the words that you typed. But often, even the gray area really isn't gray, is it? We've made it gray because we've lied to ourselves. So on one side, we don't want to be legalistic holiness people. On the other hand, but we want to have a relational holiness. We want a holiness that gives us healthy relationships with both God and man. We want to see what the glory of God tastes like. We want to get a little taste of the glory. We want to break the shackles of sin, and we want to live free. But how can we achieve such a thing? Well, I'm going to give you just a couple simple points out of 1 Peter, if I might. 1, be holy. 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 13 through 16. Therefore, prepare your minds for action. Keep sober in spirit. Fix your hope completely on the grace to be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. As obedient children, do not conform to the former lust which you yourselves in your ignorance, but like the Holy One who called you, be holy yourselves also in all behavior. Because it is written, you shall be holy, for I am holy. Well, the first point is simply be holy. Well, duh. You're thinking, Pastor, I know that. How? The word holy in this text gives us a clue. Its definition gives us instruction. Holy means to be set apart. We are to be set apart. We are to set ourselves apart. We should live by different standards than our non-believers. And I told Kyle I was going to pick on him this morning. Kyle, I want to know, if I wanted to wrestle for Claymont City Schools, what would I need to do to be a wrestler? Discipline. What does that mean? And what kind of things would those involve, just in case I'm considering doing it? So I'd have to watch my diet, possibly. Okay. What else? Good shape. So what is good shape? How do I get myself in good shape? Running, lifting weights, push-ups. Okay. Okay. And what about the skills for wrestling? How do I learn those? So it's like 5 minutes a day and you pretty much get it memorized? Or how much time do you think an average wrestler spends in wrestling season practicing those moves over and over? A day or week, you can give me 20 hours a week, 20 hours, 30 hours a week. A part-time job. You're telling me that if I just want to sit on the couch, eat Cheetos, play video games, you can't just tell me how to be a wrestler and I go out and do it. What I want to tell you is there's no difference when it comes to our faith. We have to be holy. We have to be different. We have to set ourselves apart as an example. We have to be set apart for God's use. And the only way we can be used if we are willing to prepare ourselves spiritually. We must be different. Holy here also means a second thing. It means to be pure or righteous. And you might think, but who other than God can be righteous or pure or holy? We can only be these things when we set ourselves apart for God. According to Peter, we set ourselves apart by not conforming to this world, but by being set apart, righteous, pure in all our behavior. Holiness is therefore something not that we don't just receive automatically, but we receive it in connection with our relationship with God. As we live our life and set our standards of our life by who God is, as we do those things, we then become connected to who He is, and therefore receive the title of being holy people, being righteous people. We receive purity as He cleanses us from our sin. So we're called to be holy. The second thing I would tell you is that we're not only called to be holy, we're called to be a holy people towards one another. 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 9 through 12. But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for God's own possession, so that you may proclaim the excellencies of Him who has called you out of darkness into His marvelous light. For once you were not a people, but now you are the people of God. You had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. Beloved, I urge you as aliens and strangers to abstain from fleshly lusts which wage war against the soul. Keep your behavior excellent amongst the Gentiles, so that in the thing in which they slander you as evildoers, they may, because of your good deeds, as they observe them, glorify God in the day of His visitation. In the Old Testament, one of my favorite illustrations in the Old Testament, and it was time of Christ too, they were doing this, the temple was set apart in different courts. And at the very center of the court, there was this large curtain, this large piece of material. And I'm talking about a piece of material that was a foot, I think I've heard a foot, 18 inches thick. Can you imagine the weight of that? and what it would be like to hang a curtain like that. I don't think they got any curtain rods at Lowe's that would hold that kind of a weight, let alone a curtain rod. And somehow I'm not sure how they did it, but they had the material. And only on a few occasions, the high priest would enter into that specific area of the temple. Before he went in, he had to atone for all of his sins. He had to do all the ceremonial washings. He had to make sure that he had confessed everything to God that he had done and make sure that the sacrifices he had made had covered everything. And just in case he didn't, they tied a piece of rope around his ankle, because when he went in, if he was imperfect, if he was with sin that had not been repented of, he would fall over dead, and they had to be able to drag his butt out of there. Nobody else wanted to go in after him because they had to go through that whole thing. And by that point in time, who knows what that body would have been like. So they tied a rope around his ankle. You know, amazing thing happened. When Christ died upon the cross, we were told that the curtain was torn in two. What that means for us theologically is that we no longer have to go to some special Holy of Holies to encounter God, do we? You can encounter God every time you kneel on your knees. You can encounter God every time you go to church. You can be in the presence of God when you're in your car. You can be in the presence of God within your home. There is no place that you can go on earth where God's presence will not be. So why is it then that we should feel that we can be any different in preparing ourselves before we go before the Lord than the high priest? We are called not only to be holy, behave holy, but be a holy people. When the barrier of sin is lifted, we are free to commune with God. When the barrier of habitual sin, and I'm talking about something that you do on a regular basis that you absolutely know you shouldn't be doing, yet you do it anyway, and you know that when you get done with this or that's what you're going to be going to, and you know what the Bible says about it, there's not any kind of gray area in your mind. You know you shouldn't do it. That sort of habitual sin, it needs to be lifted out of our lives so that we can have a healthy relationship with our God. We can have a healthy relationship with our family and with our friends. I have a friend on the church district. He's a pastor, and we have a common connection, and I'm not going to give his name. I don't know how much of his story he once shared. But that common connection goes back to a district superintendent. And this district superintendent, if you don't know what a district superintendent of the Church of the Nazarene, he's kind of like the head pastor of all the pastors on the district. He's kind of the pastor's boss, if you will. You do something you shouldn't do, the district superintendent's going to be giving you a visit and a phone call. You know that's going to happen. If you're having trouble or issues, you call the district superintendent for advice. That's the way it works. And so this particular district superintendent, my father, who was a pastor, had a run-in with him over an issue which we won't go into. And he had a run-in. And his run-in was, he was a part of a Nazarene church on the district that I grew up on. And as he had served the Lord, he had felt a strong calling that God was calling him into the ministry. So in order to be a Nazarene pastor in the Church of the Nazarene, if you've already gone through a divorce, you have to seek the district's approval to waive that because you've gone through a divorce, basically saying that you're all right, that whatever happened prior to that you're all right, it has nothing to do with you spiritually. Well, he went to this DS. The DS told him, because his ex-wife had remarried and he had remarried, the DS's advice was this: divorce your current wife, pursue your first wife, because you're going to go to hell and she's going to go to hell because you're currently living in an active affair, because that is not the will for God in your life. And then he added, there is no way God has called you into the ministry. Can you imagine? This man is a part of a very healthy church in our district. This man, over the years that he has served, has probably had men and women who've been called to the ministry. There have been countless people that have come to the altar and have sought out salvation and to reckon themselves with their Lord and with one another because of being under the ministry of this man. He's a fine, upstanding Christian. Yet because of a more legalistic belief that went back into our history, that some people were having issues letting go of, he could have walked away from the Church of the Nazarene. He could have walked away from ever pursuing his call. I don't know what kept him, to be perfectly honest. But he didn't. We are called to be holy, and we're also called to be a holy people. And that means being holy to one another. How we treat one another. You know, the church has no place for resentment amongst Christians. The church has no place for unforgiveness amongst Christians. When the world looks in and looks at us, if they see those sorts of qualities and they see that kind of quarreling amongst us, what does it say to them about our faith? If not that our faith is dead and there is no real teeth in it. We're called to be holy. We're called to be a holy people. 3. 1 Peter 3:13 through 18. Be prepared to give a holy message to the world. Who is there to harm you if you prove zealous for what is good? But even if you should suffer for the sake of righteousness, you are blessed. And do not fear their intimidation, and do not be troubled. But sanctify, or another way of putting that, set apart Christ as Lord in your hearts, always being ready to make a defense to everyone who asks you to give an account for the hope that is in you, yet with gentleness and reverence. And keep a good conscience, so that in the thing in which you are slandered, those who revile your good behavior in Christ will be put to shame. For it is better, if God should will it so, that you suffer for doing what is right rather than for what is wrong. For Christ also died for sins once for all, the just for the unjust, so that he might bring us to God, having been put to death in flesh, but made alive in the Spirit. Now, one of the normal ways that we go about talking about this particular text, if you heard it preached on, a pastor would tell you that you need to have a fresh testimony. You need to be able, when somebody comes up to you and they say, what is different about you? Why is it that you live by different standards? Why are you setting yourself apart? That you're ready and able to provide an answer. And not just, 25 years ago, I went to an altar. No, but 25 years ago and currently right now, this is what is going on in my life. This is why I believe Jesus is alive and why Jesus is real. This is what's going on. That's normally how we preach about it, isn't it? And there's nothing wrong with that. But as I examined last night and I struggled with the text of 1 Peter, I began to realize that Peter wasn't just talking about our words. Peter was talking about our behavior. He was talking about our actions. And if you're a parent, you know how much your behavior speaks to your children. When you find yourselves not being the parent that you know you ought to be, maybe you got a little angrier than you should have been, and your response was not all it should have been. It speaks to your kids, doesn't it? And if your kids adopt behavior you know they shouldn't have, you know right where it comes back. I mean, there is nothing that pierces the heart of a father or a mother than knowing that their kids are acting out on bad behavior because of something that you yourself have lived out in the home. And so as I look at that text and it says, be prepared to give an answer, it tells me that I need to be prepared to give an answer even in the way that I react to whatever it is that they're accusing me of. That I need to be able to react in the right, correct response and the way that I show them how it's coming at me and what I give back to them. If somebody came up to me and called my wife every name in the book to my face, and then they proceeded to go on about how horrible my children were and how they were just rotten, spoiled little devils. And they went on and they used some colorful language that I would never use from up here on the pulpit. And they were to go on about that. If I all of a sudden pushed back and my fist went up and caught them underneath the jaw, and I just knocked them flat on their butt, there'd be a lot of people that would say, woo! They had it coming. They deserved it. You were right in what you did. I mean, if it was a movie, that would be the ending of a movie. How many movies have you seen where the bad guy gets his just desserts and gets knocked to the ground or punched out by the good guy? But we are called to be prepared to give a defense. We are called to be different than the world. And sometimes the proper response is not acting out in physical violence. Now, unless you live under a rock or you don't have electricity and you haven't watched any of the news, you probably you know what has been happening this week. I mean, it's gotten so vile at the point I don't even want to turn the television on. I like reading the news, and I'm afraid to read the news. There are people in this congregation, if we were honest, we're on different sides of the aisle on how we voted for president. And we were probably on different sides of the aisle how we voted 4 years ago for the president. One of the lines that caught my attention on a Facebook post was, somebody posted, "They call my speech violence, and their violent speech." How we react speaks and provides a defense of who we are. One of the things that bothers me is I have Christian friends, and let me go a little even deeper. I have pastor friends that are both Democrats and Republicans, or at least that's how they voted. And the ways in which they are responding on Facebook by belittling one another and talking down about each other and making other people feel small on both sides, Democrat and Republican, all you need to do is insert a couple of explicit lyrics in there, words, and it wouldn't be any different than my non-Christian friends that are on the same Facebook feed. And I sat there this week thinking to myself, how are we any different? I think that song, Monica, that your daughter sang was perfect. Peace on earth. How's the world going to find peace on earth if there aren't a group of people representing, setting themselves apart, being a holy people, and coming with a holy message to a world that is hurting and trying to tear itself apart? Rather than being a part of the division, I'm not saying don't have an opinion. I'm not saying don't be passionate. But the way in which we respond with our anger and our passion and our opinion says something about who we are and who our God is and how we are supposed to be different or not different. In conclusion, I just want to say one thing. I would add, and I would end it this way. Be holy to one another. Be holy as God is holy. Be a holy people radically different than the world. Be the holy message delivered with clean lips and hands. Be holy to one another. Because, my friends, there is no other voice out there that is speaking that kind of message to a world that desperately needs to hear it. Be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. Let me pray for you this morning. Lord, as we come to the conclusion of this service, now, I'll be honest with you. A lot of times messages for pastors, they seem to somehow squarely hit us right between the eyes, don't they? I'm not preaching at a group of congregation as much as I'm even preaching at myself. I'm preaching about maybe not what I've typed, but what I've wanted to type and post on Facebook and what I've wanted to say. Lord, I just pray you continue to hold me in check. Help me to set myself apart, not for my own opinions and ideas, Lord, but for what you are and who you are and who you want me to be and the people that you want me to be a part of. Help me be different than the world out there so that as they look at me, they ask the question, why is it you are so different? Why have you set yourself apart? And I can be prepared to deliver the holy message that I'm set apart because of a Savior who I accepted in my heart and life, has radically changed me as a person, has radically changed my heart, has radically changed who I am as I seek to be holy as He is holy. Thank you, Lord, for all that you're doing, what you continue to do. in your most precious and holy name. Amen.